It is 8 p.m. on Friday, April 25th here in Korea. Live from Seoul, I'm Moon Gon-young. Now, the leaders of Korea and the United States met in Seoul on this Friday, and following their over an hour-long talk, President Park Geun-hye and visiting U.S. President Barack Obama discussed issues of mutual concern, ranging from North Korea's recent nuclear threats to delaying the 2015 transfer of Washington's wartime operational control to Seoul. Now, for details, let's go live to our presidential office correspondent, Choi Yu-sun. Yu-sun, let's first start with the issue of North Korea.
Kanyang, at a press conference following their summit talks earlier today, Presidents Park and Obama conveyed a strong message to the North Korean leadership that they will not accept further missile or nuclear provocations by Pyongyang. They said they agreed to coordinate joint efforts to deter the North's provocative behavior. And as a show of their determination, President Park said she and President Obama will visit the two countries' combined forces command headquarters in Seoul on Saturday. It will be the first time the leaders of the South and the U.S. will together visit the venue. They, however, left the door open for dialogue and assistance should Pyongyang decide to take the path of peace and stability and focus on improving the livelihoods of its people. As for Washington's scheduled wartime operational control to Seoul in 2015, the two leaders said they agreed to review delaying the process in consideration of the security threats posed by Pyongyang.
Now, Yu-sun, President Obama's latest Asia tour has garnered great attention because it comes at a time of strained relations between Korea and Japan, of course, over Tokyo's continued territorial claims and denials of its imperialistic aggressions.
Right, amid ongoing territorial disputes among countries here in the Asia-Pacific, President Obama said that the U.S. does not have a stake in specific claims that are at the center of such disputes. Obama, who just yesterday affirmed Washington's support behind Tokyo over its island dispute with Beijing, referred to it by the Japanese name. He, however, did not talk about the Korea-controlled Dokdo Island claimed by Japan. The U.S. President instead said international norms and rule of law must be followed. As for the unsettled issue surrounding the Korean victims of Japan's wartime sexual slavery, President Obama said all parties must recognize that the acts were terrible human rights violations even in times of war, and that there needs to be accurate and clear accounts of what happened. He added, however, it's in the interest of both Korea and Japan to seek ways to move forward in their relations.
Now, the U.S. president also took time to express his condolences for the victims of Korea's latest ferry disaster.
Right, with South Koreans still mourning the deaths of so many victims from the latest ferry disaster, President Obama expressed his country's deep condolences by delivering the American flag, which flew over the White House on the same day that the Sewol-ho ferry capsized last Wednesday. The U.S. president also presented a magnolia tree sapling from the White House to Tanwon High School in Korea's Ansan City, from which more than 300 students and teachers were on board the ill-fated ferry. Before starting talks earlier today, the two presidents took a moment of silence to remember the victims of the ferry disaster. This has been Choi Yu-sun reporting live from the presidential office here in Seoul.
In waters off Korea's southwestern coast where the accident happened, search operations are now well into its 10th day. Not a single survivor has been found since the ferry capsized last Wednesday morning, but efforts do continue, with authorities having decided to use what's called a diving bell at the site for the first time this afternoon. For the latest, we now go live to our Song Ji-sun at Paengmokgang Harbor, the nearest point of land to the accident site. Ji-sun.
Kanyang, the sun has set, but the operation goes on around the clock despite the wind and the current that is getting stronger. 5 more female bodies have been recovered on this Friday, raising the death toll to 185, with 170 people still missing underwater. The divers will continue their search, focusing on the 4th level of the ship, especially the center of the deck where the cabins of most Danwon High School students were located. A diving bell, a chamber that can be used as a base and transportation of divers underwater, has arrived at the accident site and will be deployed in about an hour from now. This will help to increase the number of divers engaged in search operations and would enable them to stay underwater for up to an hour without interruption. The search will go on, as parents of the missing have requested that the ferry not to be lifted out of water until every body is recovered.
Now, Ji-sun, we're hearing that deploying these latest equipments are specifically demanded by the parents who are anxiously waiting at the port there.
That's right, because this follows the request of the parents who were angry and desperate and exhausted, and they have requested a stronger and more efforts in search for their children underwater. Actually, they have sat down with the Maritime Minister as well as the Chief Commissioner of the Coast Guard, and they sat for hours and talking overnight on Thursday, questioning about the search execution in details, and are back at the same tent set up outside again at this hour. While authorities have announced over 700 divers would be utilized for search operations, only 81 actually went into the water Thursday, and 88 were scheduled to take part on Friday. That's because divers need at least 12 hours between dives to decompress, and only a handful can be underwater simultaneously due to limited space within the ferry, not to mention the limited number of diving distance lines. Civilian divers are reported to have contributed significantly in the initial stages of the search rescue, installing those guidelines into the ferry, and the diving bell also belongs to a private company. Several parents are also outside on the waters on the barge where divers are engaged in search operations. The Maritime Minister and Coast Guard Chief will stay on site to direct the operations and assist the families, as the parents have requested, until the last student is brought back on shore. This was Song Ji-sun reporting live from Paengmokgang Harbor in Sindo.
Well, the higher the death toll gets, the fewer number of families there are at an auditorium in Chindo that has served as shelter for the past 10 days for all the families of those still unaccounted for. For an update on the situation there, let's go live to our Connie Lee, who is standing by. Connie.
Hey, Kanyang. Well, just moments ago, there was a briefing held here by officials from the Coast Guard, Navy, and private rescue teams, are all those who are directly involved in the search and recovery process. Now, the briefing was held, according to their words, to clarify some misunderstandings. Now, referring to a blueprint of the sunken ship, each official explained to the anguished family members here at the Chindo Auditorium that they are doing their best to retrieve all those still unaccounted for as soon as possible. Most divers are apparently only getting about 2 to 3 hours of sleep each night as they work around the clock. Officials explained in detail which areas of the ship they have entered and which areas of the ship they have yet to explore. And now, after some arguments from unsatisfied family members, the briefing ended in applause, with family members thanking the divers for their work. Now, this sort of clarification from search and rescue officials comes a day after family members here exploded in anger. Late last night, the family members stormed out of the gym and onto a bus to Paengmokgang Harbor to confront search officials there. And as you heard from Ji-sun just a bit, there was a bit of protest between family members of those still missing and search officials. They were angry that search operations were slow and accused officials of not being transparent about their search procedures. That's all I have for you right now. This has been Connie Lee reporting live from the Chindo Auditorium.
Meanwhile, authorities are broadening their investigation into what happened on the day the Seoul ferry capsized and who is responsible for this man-made disaster. For more on this, let's go live to our Yurian. She is standing by at the news center. Lian, how is this investigation coming along? I mean, are we any closer to figuring out what the cause of this tragedy?
Kanyang, an advisory panel of 13 experts has been set up to answer that question, and they held their very first meeting about a couple hours ago at 3 p.m. local time. The panel includes professors, maritime specialists, and experts from the shipping industry. They will attempt to reconstruct the accident using a mock-up of the ferry. Now, the simulation will take into consideration the currents, the weight of the cargo, the speed of the ferry, and its condition at the time of the accident. Now, prosecutors are also looking into another ferry called the Ohamanaho Ferry, also owned by the operator of the Seoro Ferry, to look for possible clues as to why the Seoro sank. The Ohamanaho is almost identical to the Seoro in size and follows the same route. After raiding the Ohamanaho Ferry, prosecutors found out that most of its safety equipment, such as the life rafts and tubes, did not function properly. It's not a stretch to say, according to investigators, that the story would have been much the same for the Seoro Ferry.
Now, Lian, tell us, what do most experts think are the likely causes for this ferry accident?
Well, a number of possible causes have been raised over the past several days, but 3 have emerged as the most probable scenarios. One is that the Seoro ferry made a sudden right turn as it attempted to do a P-turn. Now, another possibility is that the 3,500 tons of freight on board was not secured properly, causing all the containers and vehicles in the cargo hold to list to one side, tilting the ferry. And lastly, prosecutors are looking to see whether the ferry was simply unstable due to the renovations made to maximize the number of passengers and cargo.
So hopefully the expert panel will narrow down those possibilities. Now, another one of concern that a lot of the entire Korean public is looking at is the captain and the crew members. Now, most of them are facing criminal charges.
That's right. Looking at the investigations unfold, it seems all 15 rescued crew members, including the captain Lee Jun-seok, will face criminal charges. Now, 11 have already been charged with negligent homicide while violating maritime law, with the remaining 4 under investigation as suspects. Now, the investigation is looking into the ferry's operator as well. Its management is facing accusations that it lobbied its way out of mandatory safety checkups for its vessels. Amid the crackdown, we are learning that the practical owner of the Seoro ferry operator, Yoo Byung-on, stands accused of embezzlement that he and his family own at least 3 paper companies. Investigators say these companies were used to facilitate deals among the ferry operator's affiliates, possibly for the use of providing kickbacks and other irregularities. The operator of the Seoro ferry, the Cheonghaejin Marine Company, and its affiliates were also found to own 15 overseas branches, where they have reportedly had over $9 million stashed. Now, that $9 million were marked as losses in its account book. I'll bring you more updates as we learn more in our later newscasts.
The group memorial altar in Ansan was busy all night long and is filled up again on this Friday, with visitors from all walks of life lining up to lay flowers in front of the portraits of the young people who so tragically lost their lives in this terrible, terrible disaster. We have our Kim Ji-yeon on the site. She is outside the memorial hall, and let's go live to her. Ji-yeon.
Hello, Kanyang. Inside the hall behind me, portraits of 90 students and teachers are displayed. More than 56,000 people have paid their respects here in Ansan, and I talked to some of them earlier today.
I hope they are resting in a warm place. My nephew is still in the ferry. I sincerely hope they rescue him soon.
Because a lot of people have come here. I think they are going to cross over to the other side with a smile on their face.
Jian, I'm sure there are many more of us who would like a chance to visit the memorial. When can they go?
Well, it's open 24 hours a day and is open throughout the weekends. And there's another group memorial altar in the southwestern port city of Mokpo, which is closer to the accident site. Overseas in Australia, a memorial altar will be set up starting Monday until May 2nd at the Western Croydon Park from 10 a.m. to 5 p.m. local time. Around 105,000 people have also paid a visit to the altar online for the deceased high school students and teachers. I'm Kim Jian reporting live in Ansan Olympic Memorial Hall.
Now, more than a week has passed since the Seoul ferry capsized, and still, many students who survived the disaster continue to face troubles, suffering from insomnia and emotional instability. And these survived students reportedly are hoping to get back to class, much like their schoolmates who returned to Tanwon High School yesterday. But it seems like first they will need some time to send off their fellow classmates and say their last goodbyes. Our Connie Kim reports.
It hasn't been easy for the student survivors hospitalized at Korea University Ansan Hospital, as they are still recovering from the aftershock of the tragic Seoul ferry accident. However, most of the students are hoping to go back to their classes after hearing news that Tanwon High School reopened for class Thursday. This according to the director of Korea University Ansan Hospital during a press briefing Friday. This is where all but one of the 75 Tanwon High School students are recovering. Unfortunately, students are not expected to be released anytime soon, as the hospital stated that most of them are still suffering from insomnia and anxiety. The hospital plans to release all the students at the same time to further support their mental stability. Earlier this week, the hospital has said that 1 out of 4 students are not sleeping well and that about 20% of them needed psychological therapy. Fast recovery for the students seems to be the utmost priority right now, as the Gyeonggi Provincial Office of Education has requested the media to refrain from interviewing the students. Also, the Korea University Ansan Hospital had originally restricted hospitalized students from going to the memorial altar to express their condolences, citing that it would slow down the recovery process. However, the hospital is considering whether to arrange a date when they can all go together to say their last goodbyes. A total of 74 Tanwon High School students currently hospitalized are expected to visit the memorial altar at Ansan Olympic Memorial Hall after they are released. Connie Kim, Arirang News, Ansan.
Now, turning to other news, the first quarter numbers for Hyundai Motor are in, and it was a mixed bag of sorts. However, analysts say the outlook for Korea's largest automaker could be brighter in the second quarter, especially with new models being released very soon. Our Kwon So-ah has this report.
Korea's top automaker Hyundai Motor's first quarter earnings showed mixed results, but the outlook for the second quarter is generally positive. The company's operating profit rose 3.7% in the January to March period compared to the same period last year to around $1.8 billion, with sales rising 1.9% to roughly $20 billion. However, net profit dropped 2.9% on year. Analysts say the first quarter earnings fell short of expectations because of a number of factors, including the strong local currency and the rise in sales expenses due to a reduction in old models. But experts say there is no need to worry. Although earnings aren't expected to pick up that much in the short term, a new line of models set for release should provide a boost. Hyundai forecasts that its new Genesis luxury sedan and the 7th generation Sonata will help boost sales in the coming months. Analysts say Hyundai should then start shifting more vehicles in the second quarter. They also forecast exports to rise by nearly 7%, which could push production at Hyundai past the 5 million car mark this year for the first time ever. Kwon So-ah, Arirang News.
And today marks the 100th day since avian flu broke out in the nation's midwestern province of Jeollabuk-do on January 17th. The outbreak has led to mass cullings of nearly 13 million poultry, exceeding the 12 million killed in a previous outbreak of avian flu back in 2008. While the outbreak has not yet been stopped, experts predict it could be contained after around mid-June. The estimated financial damage from the flu is expected to be record high, exceeding the previous $295 million of damage incurred in 2008. The H5N8 virus strain was confirmed to have caused the influenza, and it is the first time in the world that the virus strain has been seen in such a highly pathogenic form. And it's time now to get a check on the stories making headlines on the global front. From the deepening crisis in Ukraine to rising concerns of cyber attacks in the U.S., we go live to our Polly at the news center. Paula, let's start with Ukraine. Now, the U.S. and Russia have been locked in a war of words over the crisis in Ukraine, and it appears Washington has launched the latest volley of allegations.
That's right, Kanyang. The U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry has said in no uncertain terms that Moscow is behind the escalating conflict in Ukraine. In a press briefing on Thursday, Kerry accused Russia of stoking the very instability that it says it wants to extinguish. Kerry said instead of upholding its end of a deal reached in Geneva last week, Russia has taken steps to distract, deceive, and destabilize the region by funding and coordinating the separatist movement. He added the U.S. was drawing close to imposing more sanctions on Russia unless it backs down immediately. Meanwhile, deadly clashes erupted on the ground in eastern Ukraine, with as many as 5 pro-Russian rebels reportedly killed by government forces. In response, Moscow has launched new military drills along their shared border. And turning now to the Middle East, Israel has suspended U.S. moderated peace talks one day after Palestine's Mahmoud Abbas government agreed to reunite with its rival Hamas. An official statement said the government of Israel will not hold negotiations with a government backed by a, quote, terror organization that calls for Israel's destruction. Israel, the U.S., the EU regard Hamas as a terrorist group, in part for the near-daily attacks it has aimed at Israel from the Gaza Strip. This past Monday, a surprise unity pact was reached between the dominant Fatah faction and the Islamist Hamas group, the first of its kind in recent years. And turning to the United States, where top government officials are growing increasingly concerned of cyber attacks targeting the airline industry. According to the magazine Foreign Policy, American security and intelligence agencies are working with airline manufacturers to strengthen measures to defend against hackers that could disrupt computer systems on modern planes. The government had planned to roll out what it called next-gen air traffic control systems over the next decade to make air travel more efficient and less expensive. However, that project has hit major roadblocks. Potential security flaws were discovered in the system as it relies on GPS technology. That wraps up our look at international stories making headlines around the world. I'll be back with more updates in just a few hours.
Time now to get a check on the weather conditions for Jindo and other parts of this country. For that, our Kim Bo-kyung joins us here in the studio. Now, Bo-kyung, what can we expect?
Well, Kanyang, at the moment, conditions on Jindo are fairly gentle, but that won't last long as strong winds and showers are expected for tomorrow. Visibility has opened up to about 15 kilometers. Wind speeds have slowed down to 0.7 meter per second, and waves remain gentle at 0.4 meter. The speed of tidal currents will drop later tonight at around 11:10 p.m. There will be 3 more slowdowns tomorrow. However, tidal currents will speed up to over 2 meters per second this weekend. Some unwelcome news that the weather will no longer be favorable. Strong winds are forecast to blow at a maximum rate of 14 meters per second with waves at 2.5 meters. Elsewhere in the nation, dry weather advisories continue to be in effect, so please be on the watch out for forest fires. Otherwise, some regions may get showers on Sunday. That's all for now, but I'll be back with the latest after 10.
And those are the stories we're following at this hour. Thank you for watching, and do join us again at the top of the hour.